This time on Building the Exocet, I'm masking and painting the engine block. Alright, so this time the focus is the next step of the engine block series or engine building series I'm doing, of basically you guys getting to watch me hopefully assemble a Miata engine block correctly for my exocet build. I have the block completely cleaned, oil galleys, all the water passages, everything's as clean as I can possibly get it. Next step is basically masking off the block to get ready to apply the VHT engine enamel. I'm using a color called Universal Aluminum, and then putting their gloss clear coat over the top. The gloss clear coat, it doesn't make it especially on cast iron because of the rough surface, it doesn't make it a real shiny coating. It just adds an extra protection level. And I'm basically doing my differential housing, transmission, pan, engine block, head in the silver color, just so everything's nice and clean and shiny looking. Actually, the pan's already done. Let me grab it here. And this was the results of the of doing the engine pan. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a spectacular paint, but considering the high heat and the high heat properties, as well as the what would you call it, the chemical resistance of the paint, I think it looks pretty darn good. So hopefully when this engine block is done, it will look similar to this, and I'll have a nice bright shiny silver surface. So let's get to it. Actual masking, I'm going to be using 3M painter's tape. I use this a lot at work. In my experience, 3M stands for 3 times as much money, but as far as blue painter's tape goes, 3M does make by far the best product. It has the best adhesion, and really, I think, even though it's more expensive, I get it for about $3.50 to $4 a roll through my business because I buy a very high volume of it. But going to Home Depot and so forth, usually $5 or $6 a roll, but I always find that it is worth the money. It's also very easy to cut with a flat razor blade when you're trimming your edges. When you mask, you'll want to overlap all the edges. You're going to go through and trim with a fine razor blade to get the detail of all these grooves and curves in the masking. So basically using some old magazines and newspaper for the larger areas to mask off. Also, I have an assortment of powder coating plugs that I've been using on all my painting projects, basically for plugging all the threaded bolt holes, so I don't get any paint buildup in those. The other thing that I do have to do here is I have to reinstall new oil galley plugs and freeze plugs in those locations. Not sure if I'm going to paint those yet or leave them the brass color. I kind of think I want to paint them because I want it all the same color, but at the same time I kind of think it might be cool maybe to have a little bit of different color on the engine to show off the parts. So not sure what I'm going to do there, but now I'm just going to kind of go through and show you guys how I masked it, all the areas you need to mask and plug before painting to make sure you don't get any overspray or have any problems when you go to reassemble the block. So I will go ahead and get this all masked, and then I will show you guys all the areas on the block that I masked off. So I'm pretty much got most of the block masked off here. I probably got an hour and a half or so into it right now. I have these plugs in it that you can see. These are actually powder coating plugs, but they've been working great for plugging these holes during paint, and then the paint just chips right off of them. Now I'm at the point where I forgot to save my old freeze plugs. I mean, I do have a couple of them, I just don't have enough. I was thinking of putting those in here as a masking for the freeze plug holes, but for now I think I'm just going to go ahead and insert these in, and then if I do decide to paint these the block color, just spray right over them. If not, I can put some Vaseline or something like that inside the plug to keep the brass color there if I want to. So I'm going to use Permatex Indian Head gasket compound on all of these. I believe there's, let me see here, I got the kit around here somewhere. I think there's about 8 to 10, maybe not that many. There's about 8, and then also there's 2 oil galley plugs. These are a press-in. They are not threaded. I had my machinist pull them out because he had to drill and tap them and use a slide hammer to remove them. So I'm not going to be putting the oil galley plugs in now because the oil galleys, you can see here on the side of the block, it is all masked off, so I don't need to worry about overspray into those. These holes in particular are just going to be pretty difficult to mask off correctly, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the freeze plugs in. So basically the process, if you will, for doing the freeze plugs with this Indian Head compound is you want to take a thin layer. Sorry, let me get that in front of the camera there if I can. Around the entire piece. And let it become tacky before inserting. This stuff's getting everywhere on me. Before inserting into the block. I'm just going to go ahead and do a light, quick coating on the inside here. Being very careful to get minimal, if any, on the exterior surface of the block. Need more fingers here. Okay, now I'm going to let that set up a little bit. See if it's getting tacky. It is starting to. I'm going to let that set up for a few minutes, and then I will insert it into the freeze plug hole there. I'm going to go ahead and continue and get the rest of the plugs all ready so then I can insert them all at once. Okay, so the first freeze plug is ready. The material on both ends has become tacky, so time to insert it into the block. Basically what I'm going to be doing is just setting the freeze plug there. Paper towel, this stuff is quite nasty and sticky. Have an appropriate size socket, and then just well, maybe I don't have an appropriate size socket. First freeze plug is inserted. Sorry, I couldn't give you a video of that because the camera mounts attached to the table, so you have to pound pretty hard with the block, with the hammer to get these into that hole, and it was shaking the camera too much. So had the Indian Head sealant around the edges, then inserted into the block. It is a very, very tight fit, which is good. And that's the first plug inserted. Now I think I got about 8 more to go. Okay, as promised, a quick walk around the block here to show you what we have. Freeze plugs are installed. All the bolt holes are filled. Now for the masking. What I found on this here, I believe is the, I can't even remember anymore. Front of the block. Yes, maybe. Anyways, most of the surfaces on the front and the rear of the block are covered by some casing, some pumps, things like that. So I really don't see any need to mask off the individual machine surfaces and paint inside those. But anyways, basically bottom completely masked, side, top, and back or front completely masked. So really all you're doing is painting the sides of the block. Now if I have a 1.6 motor sitting over there for reference so I can kind of see where things bolt to, most of these holes here are bracket bolts, alternator, things like that. So these areas can be painted. They're just machined, so they are not rough with cast iron. All right, so let's pick her up and get her over and start painting. So I decided the freeze plugs, I'm not going to paint them. I don't like the look, and I remember hearing something quite a while ago about brass plugs. It's not a good idea to paint them. So little trick I learned a long time ago that I've never in fact used is when you don't want something painted, you just grease, Vaseline, anything like that surface. The paint will apply to it, however, it of course won't adhere. And then, when you are all done painting, you can simply just wipe the grease and the paint that just stuck to the grease out of that particular hole. So, I don't know if that's going to work or not, but they say it does. We'll find out here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to all these freeze plugs just to keep those from getting painted. Okay, so plugs are all greased. I think that'll turn out okay. I hope it will. We'll find out. The next thing I'm going to go for here is getting started with the VHT engine enamel primer. 10 minutes between coats, and then half hour before your color coat, then 10 minutes between coats, half hour before your clear coat, and 10 minutes between coats, then an hour to dry to the touch. The other thing with this product is it does not reach its full chemical resistance until it has been heated up for 20 minutes to a temperature of around 200 degrees. Because of that, and I have fluids and so forth I'm going to be using during the assembly process, I have been, and pretty much every part except the transmission I've been able to do this with, I've been basically sticking it in the oven after it's cured overnight and heating it up in the oven at about 225 for about a half hour or so, and then basically letting it cool down, and then it should be at a full cure. Another thing people may question, or you guys may have comments on, is, hey, I taped the edge of the machined surface here, but that is not necessarily where the head gasket will be going. That is very true. One thing I've noticed from the 1.6 block that I can see is the head really covers most of it. There's probably some areas like this and out here where it will not, but those I'm going to go ahead and just touch up, paint later, as I don't want to cut on the mating surface in case I'm wrong, using the head gasket as a template. So for now, I just masked the entire machine surface off. This is the bottom of the motor, but let's pretend if this was the head, you would have that problem. I probably will too, because I'm assuming, and I may be wrong, but I'm assuming the oil pan does not exactly follow these machined cutout surfaces, so there will be some touch-up paint that will need to be done afterwards. If you wanted to do it appropriately, it wouldn't be a bad idea to set your pan on there and carve out around it. I'm just pretty comfortable with how I did it now and touching it up later. So first coat here using the engine enamel primer. I got the can shaken up, just double check. Just light mist coats are all that you want. You aren't trying to seriously coat it. You're just trying to get a nice little mist on the block. And I have just been doing 1 to 2 coats of the primer on the cast iron, because the cast iron is so porous, and I just really don't see the need to go with 3 or more coats. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that assumption. But Probably a little heavy of a coat there, but now we will let that dry for 10 minutes. Actually, I've got one spot here. And we will come back and do another coat of primer. Okay, so it has been 30 minutes since my second coat of primer, and I'm now ready to apply the engine enamel. This is the color. It is called Universal Aluminum. And basically 10 minutes between coats on this as well. They recommend 2 medium light coats and 1 medium wet coat. I do 2 to 3 medium light coats and leave it at that. I find any time with this product that I do a medium wet coat, I get runs, even with the heat. I got a space heater here behind me going and keeping this area probably about 70 to 75 degrees. And so I need that extra, that less of a final coat to get a good finish on it. If I go any further with the final coat, then I find that I have problems and I get runs and sags and things like that in the finish. So time to put this coat on, and then we'll wait 10 minutes to do the next coat. Okay, so this is after, oh crap, what did I do? I think 3 coats of the color. Great coverage, looks uniform, everything looks fine. Next up is the engine enamel gloss clear. Like I said, it doesn't add a whole lot of shine to it. It does add some, but it's mainly an extra protective finish for the motor. So I've usually been putting 2 coats of this on and I do light to medium coats. I do not do a third heavy coat because from what I have had experience with, the third medium wet coat runs like the dickens. So 2 light coats I find gives a nice, even, little bit pop sheen and gives that protective coating. The other thing too, when you're dealing with a rough cast iron finish like this block, you're not going to see the glossy reflectiveness that you would in a flat machined part. So 2 coats of this, 10 minutes apart, and then let it dry for an hour, and then we can remove our masking. So I just pulled the block out of the oven. I baked it for about an hour at 225 degrees, and then let it sit in there until it cooled down. The freeze plugs, I got a little bit of detailing left to do on them, but for the most part, the paint, the little wax trick worked great. The paint came right off. Just put my finger in there and removed the goo, I got nice brass looking freeze plugs there. The masking went very well. Everything looks in pretty good shape. I still am on some of these top edges where the head gasket does not cover. I am still going to have to touch up some paint on there, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that's how you get the engine block all painted up and ready to go. Be nice having the block, the pan, and the head all the same color, nice and clean. So that's it for this video. Next video I'm going to be showing you prepping some of the machine surfaces on the block, how I'm going to do that to get ready for assembly, inserting oil squirters and things like that. So until next time, thanks for watching.